The reason the Lowdown Huthenbach newspaper was started, I think, was simply that my husband was a long-time newspaper guy. He simply wanted his own paper. It's like somebody who drives a truck. I mean, if you drive a truck for somebody, maybe you want to own a truck.
I lived down the road from Art and Kitty, so as soon as it came out, I heard all about it and I started reading it. And they never had sports. So I said, Art, how come you never had sports? And he said, you want to read sports? Write it. And that's how I got involved.
I guess I became aware of its existence about 30 years ago. My wife and I were renting a place down in Chelsea, and we were just dropping by the store there and saw the Lowdown and started picking it up. And I think even before that we were aware of it because my wife had a cottage not far from here, so we would drive up through the village often and stop and pick up the newspaper, bring it up to the cottage. So I kind of always knew it was there, but it really wasn't until we moved to Wakefield a couple of years later, which is about 29 years now, that we became more engaged, I guess, in the community and started seeing some of the dynamics in the village and the politics and all those kind of things, and wanted to be more, get more informed about what was going on.
I moved to Chelsea when I was 2. My mom bought like a classic Chelsea cottage. It had an outhouse. We renovated it. Living there as a little kid, like the Lowdown was kind of the only connection to the broader community that we had. So I can't really imagine living in Chelsea without the Lowdown. There was sort of this cool factor about the paper that I caught on to even as a kid. Like without any notion of what cool was, the Lowdown was part of our community. It was part of the gossip.
So I came to know about the Lowdown. I was actually in journalism school in Calgary, and some family members actually lived here. And I had never been here before. And so I'd finished journalism school, just didn't really feel like I fit in Calgary anymore. And so, family members convinced us to, come over. And it's funny because I called Nikki. I remember I was at college and I called Nikki and I said, hey, I see you have a job opening. I'm a budding journalist and I'd love to come and write for your paper. And she said, great, send me some of your work samples. And so I did, and she responded and said, I can't hire you because you're a terrible writer. She loved my photos, but the writing had to come a long way. And so, I said, okay, well, we're moving anyway, so maybe we can have a coffee sometime together. And we actually, the first day I arrived here, I was hanging out on a dock down on the river, and 3 cop cars went by. And so I grabbed my camera and ran down to check what was going on. And there was another woman there taking photos, and I started taking photos, and she turned to me and she asked, who are you with? And I said, oh, I'm just a freelancer, so we, continued taking photos of the cop cars. And then again, she said, well, who are you shooting with? And I was like, oh, honestly, nobody. I just moved here today. I saw cop cars come. And she was like, are you Trevor? And I was like, yeah, are you Nikki? And she was like, oh my God, yeah. And then boom, I had a job. She right away, she was like, you got a nose for news, kid. Like, you saw those cop cars, you ran out and you went into action. So that started our relationship. And here we are, 10, 12 years later.
It's funny because I think I've always been aware of the Lowdown. I was born in Aylmer and grew up there, and but it wasn't until I moved back to Chelsea when I was in my mid-30s that I became really like an avid reader. But it's always just sort of seemed to be like the water in which we Anglophone fish swim.
I was 25. And my mom and dad had run the paper for 25 years. My dad gave me a call. I was living in Vancouver. He said, we're going to sell the paper. I'm sure you're not interested, but this is it. So I had been planning to travel the world. I'd been living in Mexico, was in Vancouver, was headed to Japan. I thought, oh, you know what? I'll try running this paper for a year. And that was 25 years ago.
Um, well, we always covered the municipal council meetings. My husband came to LaPeche to do it. I went to Chelsea. And I came home from a Monday evening council meeting to find our big dog had had puppies in the middle of our bed. Otherwise, no, I wish my husband were here because he was really the mover and shaker and he would be able to give you a better answer.
The fact that one thing Art Mantell could put a title on something that really drew attention, like for instance, one of our stories ended up in Reader's Digest, and it was the title was "You Can't Take a Leak in Gatineau Park." But Art had a real flair for puns.
Okay, it's easy to answer about the most memorable moment at the Lowdown because it happened right at the very beginning when I just started. I was 25 and I was just taking over as publisher from my dad. He was still around and helping. And the thing that was so great about it is that we had a huge news scoop. We became the news. It became an international story we were involved in. And I got to go through all of it with my dad and learn from him in the process. And it was so much fun. So basically, there's a front page on our wall in the office that shows the front page that we ran. That sums it up. We got into a battle with the Office de la Langue Française, and we took a photo of one of their agents coming in who was measuring signs. That's what the OLF did. And then she threatened us with, "You can't run this photo or else, dun, dun, dun," by fax. She sent us a fax threatening us. And so we basically did exactly what she didn't want us to do, ran it on the front page, and it caused, the story went huge. The story went national, it went international, it was picked up by all the media outlets, and my dad and I had so much fun. We were getting phone calls, so I would be sitting here being interviewed by Global TV, and the guy from the National, on CBC's The National, would be banging on the window going, "I'm next." And my dad would be fielding calls, and he'd be saying, "All right, kiddo, now we're gonna do this interview." And it was basically, and we had people from all over the country they sent in letters because we didn't have the internet back then. It went viral when you couldn't go viral, and it was so much fun. I learned a lot from my dad in the process of how to treat a big news story and how to have fun with a big news story, and it was one of my best moments.
Well, the thing about the Lowdown is that it hits you on so many different levels at once, because on the one hand, it's always wonderful to see your neighbors or your friends' kids on the front page. But I would say the time the Lowdown really got me was when they did their April Fool's joke about you can't paint your house yellow, and the ice cream store used to be next door, and they had just painted their house yellow. And this is totally typical of something Chelsea would do, and I completely fell for it. And I was like, "Oh my God, you guys, you're never gonna believe it. Did you get a permit?" They just, and I was hook, line, and sinker. I was similarly completely with the Ryan Reynolds thing too. I was convinced. So my heart broke a little bit that day.
Well, I certainly can describe several interesting things. Was my first day at the Lowdown, I discovered that you had to go in one door downstairs, across the kitchen. Didn't matter that if they were having breakfast or not. You went across the kitchen, and then upstairs, over the bedroom, was where the office was. Okay. And it was, you went in hoping to be very quiet, and usually the girl that did the ads, who was Yvonne Larocque, either tripped and fell up the stairs, or we got giggling, and I'm sure we woke them at, 8 o'clock in the morning. And then we all had to line up so we could use the washroom to develop pictures, because there was a lineup and there was only one washroom. And Art and Kitty got first dibs on it, I guess.
Well, she was wrong. The agent for the OLF was wrong. And so when we we got support from like it was a David versus Goliath story, right? Like the lawyer for the Montreal Gazette backed us, and so he just called it government gangsterism. And in the end, she had gotten the rule about privacy and photography wrong, and so she had to completely back down. And we never submitted the photos. In fact, here's a little secret. We actually took the negatives and photos, and when they were paving the sidewalks in Wakefield, we stuck the photos and the negatives under the cement, and so it's buried 6 inches under. We marked an X. We know where it is.
One of the things about the paper that was really popular was the misprints. There was no such thing as spell check. No such thing as spell check. And so some of the stuff that went in was pretty weird. I can remember one that I did was Yvonne was away and I was doing the ads. And I was doing the ads for the United Church, and I put something about the United Church, and I put, but the untied church is, so of course I confused United and Untied. So I got a phone call right away saying, "Is that our ad?" Oh, but there was lots of spelling errors. But that was part of the charm of the paper.
Yeah, I think one of my most memorable moments is writing the Bill 21 story. The Chelsea teacher Fatima Anvari, who was fired from her teaching job for wearing a hijab. I'm really proud of that story, first of all, because a reader came to us with that scoop. You know, they didn't go to the CBC, they didn't go to the Citizen, they trusted us with that story. And we wrote it in a really compelling way, and it went national. And it was a great story because it told a really compelling story, but it also changed things on the political spectrum. You know, support for Bill 21 dropped 12% in Quebec after we published that story, and that happened right here at the Lowdown. So we're really proud of that. It made a difference right away, and you know, it made a difference in someone's life.
But do you guys all remember 2010 when Hillary Clinton came to visit? You all remember that? Yeah. Yeah, Lawrence Cannon, exactly. Yeah, Lawrence Cannon, our MP at the time. Yeah. So I was lucky enough to be one of the official photographers that got to go up to the Wakefield Mill and shoot the event. And I remember it was on a Monday, and you know, they rolled out the proverbial red carpet for, you know, Lawrence Cannon and Hillary Clinton. And they walk through the line, and I'm there with a bunch of other photographers, paparazzi style, pop, 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 pop. I shoot the photos, and I run down to the newsroom. I'm like, okay, I got to go through these photos because we're on deadline. And you know, we start going through the images, and I picked my photos, and so you know, Nikki comes in, and you know, she wants to know what the photos look like. So, you know.
So yeah, so we were looking through the photos, and Trevor, you picked out one. Jess, can you put it up on the screen?
Oh, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one.
Okay.
That one.
Okay.
That's the one that I picked. That's the one I picked.
Yeah.
Clear shot. It's a great photo. You see their faces. You know.
Yeah, so this is a standard photo, right? They look great. It's classic. They're in focus. They're smiling. And we're like, yeah. I'm like, Trevor, yeah, that's good. But what else have you got?
Yeah.
Show me what else is there.
So we start going through my photos, and then this one comes up. Yeah.
Right? So, like, there's something going on in this photo, right? Like, that's the better photo to choose, right?
But at the time, I remember saying, okay, but Nikki, what's the headline? What's the headline? So what do we do?
We're scratching our heads. We don't know. So what do we say? We say,
Let's go to art.
yeah. So
Let's go
art.
to art.
And my dad worked right to the very end. You know, he was downstairs. He would be proofreading. He would be helping us with headlines. He would help us with leads. So we said, Art, what's the headline on
What do
this
you got
one?
for us? What do you got for us? And he's like, yeah, okay, give me a couple minutes, like he always does. We go upstairs, and I hear him screaming. And we run downstairs, and Art is slapping his knee. And he's like, I've got it! And this is what he came up with.
Yeah. And so for those of you in the back who may not be able to read it, and for those of you who are not familiar with Mae West, that says, Is that a cannon, or are you just happy to see me?
I discovered when I started working for the school board, because I was new to this area, we just arrived, that the schools that were rural and very small, often the children who lived on farms had never been to Ottawa. 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds who'd never been to Ottawa. They lived 50 miles or 50 kilometers away. They'd never been to Ottawa. And so I talked to the people at the youth hostel, the new youth hostel in the prison, in the jail, and said, could I bring classes of students here if I have teachers and parents who are prepared to bring them here, so that we would have enough supervision. But it was a very popular program and with the schools, because they would have overnight experience by staying there. They would have meeting young people from around the world who were staying at a youth hostel, and then they had access to the city. We were able to go to museums and events and skate on the canal and so on. So we had a really interesting program there, and the rural schools really appreciated that. So that's the story.
Look, when you don't have a local newspaper, when you don't have somebody telling your stories, somebody reflecting what you do, putting fire to the feet of mayors, asking the tough questions, being the watchdog, even just the stories about bake sales and fundraisers and whatever it is that makes a community stronger, you need a local newspaper to tell those stories. Because when you don't, a community is depleted. You don't have the community doesn't come together in the same way. And so that applies to all communities, but especially for minority communities like an Anglophone community in Quebec.
Yeah, I was really, really proud of our Bill 96 coverage. When the CAQ was pushing to adopt that bill, there was a lot of Anglophones who felt like they didn't have a voice. Our own MNA, Robert Boussier, wasn't answering their questions. He was dodging questions. And we really became the voice for the Anglophones in this region. We were at an event where Robert Boussier was announcing an internet announcement. And a bunch of protesters showed up at the event and were told they had to stay outside. Robert Boussier wouldn't come out. He wouldn't talk to them. So I went in there as a journalist. I went in there and I was able to pin him down on those questions. He wouldn't answer their emails. He wouldn't answer their phone calls. It was my job to go in there and get him to answer those questions, and I was able to do that. And that's our role and that's our job. That had major impact because, again, these residents, these Anglophones, had no answers, and they were frustrated. They were tired, and they just wanted to hear from their elected representative, who was not giving that to them. And so I was able to get in and ask him those burning questions and force him to answer them. And again, that's our job.
As a business owner in Chelsea, it really took on a greater significance to me. The Lowdown really feels like a friend, but you always have to be a bit wary of it. So I've had, the benefit and the misfortune of having a reasonable amount of coverage over the years in the Lowdown. And the anticipation of sort of waiting for sometimes like the godlike paper and the journalists to give their take on something that you've put heart and soul into is not quite enough to keep you up at night, but certainly enough to be at the store before the paper gets delivered, so you can dive right into it. Like, I can think of a couple of examples where the Lowdown, you always know that they're going to step up for something. So I was heavily involved in the establishment of Commerce Chelsea. It was our local chamber of commerce. And for the first time as a chamber, we wanted to hear all of the local candidates debating in a public forum about their positions, because we had some major infrastructure projects happening in Chelsea, and a lot of the individual councillors didn't even want to show up for a public debate because they thought, well, we don't have to subject ourselves to the community. This was a new idea. So the way that we got them to come was I contacted Nikki Mantel at the Lowdown and I said, hey, would you moderate this? Because we're having a hard time getting the mayor or the councillors to actually be willing to stand up and have this public debate. So Nikki wrote a little story about it, wrote about the hesitancy of some of the councillors to come, and we had like standing room only, 300 people, and ever since the Lowdown has run an all candidates debate in Chelsea. So it's sort of a balancer. It holds community members accountable to each other. It holds our politicians accountable. It's hilarious often. So it's just got this deep role of connecting the community over generations.
Well, it was the only thing there was, and it was a real asset, not only to bring issues that were necessary for people in the community to know, and it also was a way of preserving the history of the Gatineau Hills.
The Lowdown, I think, has become an institution. When you talk to people out on the street, they say the Lowdown is their Bible. You know, I think we have a role here. We're part of the fabric of the community, and I think it's our job to sort of hold things together, bringing two sides together, and getting both perspectives. You know, we tell the community story, and we tell the history, and the town and the area is just richer because of the newspaper. I think what sets us apart from other media outlets is the founder of the paper, the late Art Mantel, and he passed this on to his daughter Nikki. They've always said, write like an insider, you know, and that really speaks true to me, because our readers, we know our readers. They're smart. They understand the issues. And so when we go into a story, it's not just a surface level, this is what happened. No, we go deep into the issues. We hit where we know it's going to relate to our readers. And that's it. You know, we write like an insider. And I think doing that, we just get richer stories, deeper perspectives. And, you know, in turn, judges at award ceremony see that, and we win tons of awards every year. So it's a nice response, you know, to the work we do. I think the biggest challenge in journalism today is bringing the two sides together. I think our world is so divisive. You know, you've got, you know, both, you know, camps on, you know, the right and the left, and they're in their own echo chambers. You know, and I think it's our job to bring those two sides together to talk. You know, there's been a lot of divisiveness with the convoy, the pandemic. You know, now it's, you know, trans and gay rights, and it's our job to you know, bring those two sides together, bring those two perspectives together, so that these two sides can begin to talk and find a way forward. And I think that's why we're here.
But if you think about it, what would the community look like without this newspaper, Rita? You know, Luther, everybody. What would it look like? But what would the community, if we want to be serious, you know, we try to be informal because it's the Lowdown, it's quirky, and that's why I got her the quirky socks tonight. And what would the community look like without the Lowdown?
We wouldn't know what it looked like.
It would be hard to know what it looked like. We wouldn't know.
So, yeah, I mean, like the revenue model has changed, and we're trying to find new sources of revenue. We've had some success, and we're trying out some new ones. But what I see, you know, it's really like traditional media's advertising represents like 75% of revenue. Like that's the model typically, but that's dropping year after year after year. Where the future is in the readers. Right? Like the future's in readers, people like you. I'm so glad, you know, we never gave away the Lowdown, where I'm so appreciative that you guys buy the Lowdown and appreciate news and you purchase it. We're going to be counting on you as the years go on. But no, I don't have a silver bullet, but we're trying things.
Trevor, any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it like Nikki said, I think it's up to readers. You know, I think it's up to the readers to just, you know, tell each other and to the world how important news is, right? And that starts by buying the paper.
I don't have a crystal ball, but I feel optimistic.
It was a great paper, and it still is. And I think it's changed course a little bit. It's a little more serious about serious things, and there's a little less human interest. And I'd like to see it go back to writing stories about people that have been living in the Gatineau Hills for years and years and years, and the charm of the Gatineau Hills.
Anybody starting out in journalism, the advice I would give them is that change happens locally. I think a lot of journalists get into the profession with the hopes and dreams of working at the New York Times, the Globe and Mail, or the Citizen, or these bigger papers. But I think it's important to realize that you can make a really, really awesome career at a local newspaper. Every story you write is read by everybody who reads it, every single word, and it has impact every week. Sometimes with bigger papers it's hard to get that, but we know our readers, we know them well, we know the area, and when we write stories, that has impact right away, and that's where you see change happen. So anybody getting into journalism, there's a really, really great career path in local news.
Man, it's like every week getting the paper out is, it's hard to pull your head up and look to the future because it's so, every week, it's the deadline, right? You're making the deadline. But if I had any hopes or aspirations for the Lowdown, it would be, we don't want to be some big regional paper or expand past what we already do. We want to double down on our community. We want to serve our community better. We would love to be, we'd love to be a 40-page paper that still focuses on all the things that we do now, only just more of it and more in depth and more thoughtful and more voices and more perspective, but all from the Gatineau Hills community. That's what I'd like. And to pay the bills.